Welcome to Perspectives from the Contemporary Policy Institute. I'm Andy Thorburn. My guest today is Chris Erickson. Chris is a practicing attorney and a Board of Education trustee. So first of all, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to talk about these critical issues that are facing public education.
Well, our main topic today would be to take a look at the effect of the culture wars on public education, including, the financial cost of some of these conflicts. And so one of the challenges we have when we talk about the culture wars is trying to determine which type of conflict kind of squarely fits into the mainstream of policy disputes that we've had in this country for many generations, as opposed to those that create a special kind of expenditure of time and energy and money that's not aimed at improving public education, but is really based on a political or religious agenda that's being pursued by some individual or sometimes by an organization. So as a trustee, I wanted to ask you, have you seen an increase in these cultural issues as opposed to educational issues?
Absolutely. There's been a marked shift from those issues that are sort of standard public education issues, which are student achievement, quality curriculum, equitable access to curriculum, bond issues, facilities issues, all of those things that are sort of in the standard, and maybe controversial at times, but are within the standard area of debate for education. And we've really seen it shift and be dominated by things like book bans, correct usage of pronouns, ideological litmus tests for teachers. And these issues are often driven by outside forces, political forces, and not necessarily by the parents and stakeholders within the district. And in fact, when you see a lot of these people who show up at these meetings, you'll see the same people at 20 different school districts. And so it's very much driven sort of by this outside force rather than this genuine concern within the district and by parents and teachers within the district.
So these new conflicts are not about improving education in a broad-based sense. It's about a kind of narrow agenda where somebody wants to pursue a narrowly religious or other ideological agenda.
For certain,
right.
For certain.
Well, I want to take a look, though, at one particular type of them. We know that there are some of these conflicts that result from elected officials not following the law. Mm-hmm. And that gets into lawsuits and countercharges, and of course that becomes very expensive. So let's talk about that for a second. Again, you're a trustee, you've seen these things in action. Have you seen these kind of conflicts arise where a board or elected official just refuses to follow an existing law?
Absolutely. So this actually did happen in our district, although it didn't result in litigation in our particular case. But in a neighboring district, we had, we have certain obligations to offer health education. And particularly in California, it's under the California Healthy Youth Act. And a particular school board refused to do that because it included LGBTQ plus issues, references to LGBTQ plus needs for children, which is required by law. And the school board rejected the curriculum and refused to implement it. And they didn't cite problems with student achievement and different things like that. They cited their own personal religious beliefs. And that happened again in our district as well, where we did pass the curriculum, but those who voted against it didn't cite problems with the curriculum itself. They cited their own personal religious beliefs. And so what that did is it resulted not in our district, but in this other district, not just in litigation, but in all sorts of just chaos and mistrust and chaotic meetings, things where security had to be hired to come to the meetings. And so there's this whole sort of domino effect that occurs when a board refuses to implement what they're required to implement by law.
Some researchers at UCLA did a study of culture war issues. Mm-hmm. And what they found is that in the 23-24 school year, nationally, the country spent over $3 billion on cultural issues, money that would normally go to educational issues. They spent $3 billion. And in California, we estimate it's between $200 and $300 million that was spent in that same academic year. That's hard costs, defending culture wars. So let's take a look at that. You mentioned one already, but in terms of an actual breaking of the law, can you take us through a situation you might be aware of where elected officials did not follow the law and how that might have resulted in some actual serious financial consequences for the district?
Well, I think you can look at one of our local districts who refused to implement a particular book, refused to use a textbook because it involved or referenced Harvey Milk in that particular situation. And rather than use the books, they decided basically that they were just going to thumb their nose at the state. And it didn't just result in the hard costs of litigation. Ultimately, the state stepped into that. But it resulted in time spent consulting lawyers. So there were the costs directly related to litigation, but it's also time spent by staff. It's time spent by teachers talking to parents and trying to explain, even though they don't even completely understand what's happening, but it's time spent away from issues that deal directly with student needs in the classrooms. So you end up with really a chaos driven agenda when you show up at a school board meeting as a trustee, but also when you show up in the classroom and teachers are having to respond to these things that really aren't helping a child learn. And I think that's really part of the intent when people come and they create chaos and they have this real tinge of violence. You know, we have to have, as do surrounding districts, security at our board meetings. We've had a riot breakout in our boardroom where we had to be rushed out of the room out of fear that we were going to be attacked. So our district was one that was definitely impacted by a takeover, what I would say is a radical takeover of culture warriors who overtook our district. And then that resulted, so I've seen firsthand everything that flows from this.
So here again, you see a combination of both hard and soft costs.
Correct.
Most people aren't calculating the additional cost of more security. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can't calculate, as we talked about, how the chilling effect that it has on teachers, on board members, and on people who don't want to run for office, on potential candidates that might really have the interest of the students at heart. They're interested in education. They're not interested in the culture wars. And they say, I'm not going to run for office.
Well, and it's not only that. We lost a lot of staff. We lost quality staff members who were, you know, a lot of them were those innovative, out-of-the-box thinkers who really just love and have a passion for teaching and wanting to provide a stimulating environment for students. A lot of them left. They don't want to be in a district that's in chaos. They don't want to, it's not worth it. They want to be in a place where they have academic freedom and that they can, you know, really do something for the students and not be caught up in this. So that is a real cost. It's a drain of talent.
And you have to recruit new teachers.
And you have to recruit new teachers, and then that takes more training, and that is a cost in and of itself.
And as all this money is being spent, it's being spent at exactly a time when school districts are under other kinds of financial pressure, including declining enrollments. So if we focus again specifically on two things, if we focus on those kinds of conflicts which arise from violation of the law. So it's not necessarily a parent that complains about a book, but a school board member or another official that says, I know the law says I'm supposed to do this, I'm not going to do it. And that leads to all these soft and hard costs we've talked about. What do you suggest? Is there a path that we can tell people to follow? Is there something we can do as citizens, as taxpayers, as voters that can alleviate that problem?
Well, I do think one thing that would help the problem, and one of the biggest, I think, gaps that we sort of have is this lack of a functioning complaint system that would allow for early resolution of some of these things.
You mean a complaint system that would be statewide?
Administered by the state. I mean, we need a quick, transparent, easily accessible system that a lot of these complaints can be processed through.
And we don't have that in California?
We do not have that in California.
So what does a parent do now if they have a complaint? They just have no avenue at all other than the courts?
It really comes down to people not having much of a choice other than to litigate. And obviously prevention is much cheaper than litigation. Right. And it would be, I think that it would make sense for the state to provide this opportunity to have this really robust and functioning complaint process at the administrative level, because they're funding the school districts and then sometimes turning around and suing the same school district, and so they're spending the money that they are supposed to be, funding for classrooms, are now being spent on defending cases that either the state brings or that a parent or other stakeholder brings.
Certainly a portion of this expense that we've talked about is the result of an enforcement gap, that there's no way that the state enforces the mandates that they've passed.
Correct.
And if a parent sees a lack of enforcement, they don't really have a way to address that other than maybe their own cost and their own litigation.
Absolutely.
So a complaint system that would be run by the state and funded properly and would be responsive and have laid out timeframes and everything else would do something. But we can reduce the money and time and soft costs of these culture wars with a robust statewide complaint system.
Absolutely. I believe we could. And I believe that that would be productive because it can allow teachers, administrators, and school board members to get back to the business of educating our students and really focusing on student achievement and focusing on quality curriculum and focusing on equitable access to it.
Well, that's a perfect way to end. That's certainly our goal, and we hope that everybody will take this to heart. And as elections come up, let's work on getting some type of complaint system in place that will be workable and robust and properly funded. And we thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, Chris.
Well, I appreciate the chance to talk about this. This is really important, and I appreciate that you're focused on this issue, so thank you.
Thank you.